My mill secretly enrolled my daughter in a different school without telling me, and now I'm finding out this has been going on for way longer than I thought. I don't even know where to start with this because every time I think I have a handle on what happened, I find out something new that makes it worse. So I'm just going to type it out and maybe someone can help me figure out if I'm completely losing my mind or if this is as insane as it feels. I, 52F, have been married to my husband Dale for 11 years. He has a mother, Renata, who I have never fully gotten along with but who I have always tried to be respectful toward because she's his mom and because I didn't want to be that wife who makes her husband choose. I have bent over backwards for this woman. I hosted her for holidays when she was between apartments. I drove her to medical appointments when Dale was traveling for work. I sent her flowers on her birthday every single year since 2014 without missing once, even the year my own father was in the hospital and I could barely function. I'm saying this not to brag but because the context matters for how blindsided I am right now. Dale and I have one daughter together. Her name is Petra, she's 9, and she is the best thing either of us have ever done. We also have Dale's son from his first marriage, Marcus, who is 16 and lives with us full-time because his mom relocated to another state 4 years ago and Marcus didn't want to go. I love Marcus. He is difficult and moody in the way that 16-year-old boys are difficult and moody, but I love him. Okay. Here's what happened. 3 weeks ago I got an email from a school I didn't recognize. The subject line was something like upcoming placement assessment for enrolled students. I almost deleted it as spam, but I opened it because it had Petra's full name in the preview. The email was addressed to me but also CC'd to Renata, and it was from a private school about 40 minutes from our house, a school called Halcyon Academy, thanking us for completing Petra's enrollment and reminding us about an upcoming assessment date. I read it probably 4 times before my brain accepted what it was saying. Petra is enrolled in her school. Our neighborhood school. The school we toured when she was in kindergarten, where she has friends, where her teacher Ms. Adiemi has known her for 3 years and once told me Petra was one of the most empathetic kids she'd ever taught. Petra is not enrolled in Halcyon Academy. I had never heard of Halcyon Academy. I have never filled out paperwork for Halcyon Academy. I have never given anyone permission to enroll my daughter anywhere. I called Dale immediately. He was at work and I could tell he was in the middle of something, but I didn't care. I said, "Did you enroll Petra in a school called Halcyon Academy?" Silence. Not a short one. The kind that answers the question before any words do. Dale. My mom mentioned it, he said. She found it and thought it might be a good fit for Petra, so she started the process. I didn't think she'd actually finish it. I asked him to repeat that because I was sure I'd misheard. He repeated it exactly. His mother had started the process of enrolling our 9-year-old in a school neither of us had agreed to. Dale knew she was doing it, and his response had been to wait and see if she'd follow through. "Why would you not tell me this was happening?" I said. "Because I knew you'd react like this." I want to be clear that I was not yelling at that point. I was very calm in the way you get calm when something is so far outside normal that your emotions haven't caught up yet. "React like what?" I said. "Like a person whose mother-in-law enrolled our daughter in a school without our consent?" He said his mom had good intentions and that Halcyon Academy had a great academic reputation and maybe we should at least look at it before I shut it down completely. I hung up. I'm not proud of that, but I hung up. Then I called Renata. She answered on the second ring, which is unusual for her. She has a habit of letting my calls go to voicemail and calling Dale back instead. She sounded completely normal. Cheerful, even. She said, "Oh good, you got the email. Isn't it exciting?" "Renata," I said, "did you enroll Petra in a school without asking me?" "I enrolled her to hold a spot," she said. "They have a wait list. I didn't want her to miss the window." "You don't have the authority to enroll her anywhere. You're not her parent." She got quiet in a different way than Dale had. Less guilty, more calculated. Then she said, "I've been involved in Petra's life since she was born. I think that gives me some standing to make decisions that are in her best interest." I cannot describe the feeling that went through me when she said that. There was something in her voice that wasn't just defensiveness. It was confidence. Like she had thought about this. Like she had an answer prepared. I said, "You need to contact the school and withdraw that enrollment." She said she'd think about it. "Renata. This is not a negotiation." She said, "I'll talk to Dale," and hung up. So that's where we were 3 weeks ago. Since then, things have gotten progressively stranger, and I am now sitting here at 11:30 at night because I cannot sleep and I need to write this down somewhere. Dale came home that night and we had a long, bad conversation I won't fully reconstruct here because it went in circles. The headline version: he agreed his mother should have asked us first, he agreed it wasn't okay, but he kept softening it, she means well, she just loves Petra, can we please not make this into a war? I told him it wasn't me who had started anything. He looked exhausted. I felt exhausted. We went to sleep on opposite sides of the bed and I stared at the ceiling until about 3 in the morning. The enrollment has not been withdrawn. I know this because I called Halcyon Academy myself and confirmed that Petra is still enrolled, and that no withdrawal request has been submitted. The woman I spoke to said she could only process a withdrawal if it was submitted by the person who completed the enrollment, listed as Renata, or by a legal guardian. I asked what information Renata had provided during enrollment and she said she couldn't share that over the phone, but she could mail me a copy of the enrollment forms if I submitted a written request as Petra's parent. I submitted that request the same day. The forms arrived yesterday. There is a line on the emergency contact and guardianship section that I have been staring at for 18 hours. In the field marked primary guardian, Renata wrote her own name. Not Dale's name. Not my name. Hers. And in the field asking for the relationship to the child, she wrote, grandmother, primary caregiver. Primary caregiver. I have been Petra's primary caregiver for 9 years. I do the school pickups. I schedule the dentist appointments. I know the name of every kid in her class and which one she eats lunch with, and that she's been going through a phase where she only wants to read books about animals, and that she cried for 45 minutes in October because a bird flew into our window and died on the porch. What does Renata know that I don't? Why would she write that? Why would she think she could get away with it? I haven't told Dale I have the forms yet. Maybe because the last time I brought this up he looked at me like I was the problem. Maybe because I need to think first. But there's something else. At the bottom of the enrollment packet, there's a section listing supplementary documents submitted with the application. One item is described as custody documentation. I don't know what that means. I don't know what documentation she could possibly have submitted. Petra is my biological daughter. Dale and I are married. There is no custody arrangement because there has never needed to be one. I'm going to find out what that document is. Update 1. I showed Dale the forms. I waited until Petra was at school and Marcus was at a friend's house. I sat Dale down at the kitchen table and put the enrollment packet in front of him. I didn't say anything dramatic. I just said, read the guardianship section. I watched his face while he read it. And here's the thing I keep coming back to, his expression was not the expression of a man seeing something for the first time. It flickered. Some micro-expression he covered almost immediately with what I can only describe as performed shock. He looked up and said, this is insane. She wrote herself as primary guardian? What is she thinking? Dale. Did you know she was going to do this? Of course not. Absolutely not. I didn't know about any of this. What about the custody documentation? The packet lists custody documentation as a submitted attachment. What is that? He shook his head and said he had no idea, that he was going to call her right now. He picked up his phone and called her, right there in front of me, and I watched him pace around the kitchen while it rang and went to voicemail. He left a message that sounded genuinely angry. He said, Mom, I need you to call me back today. I've seen the paperwork. We need to talk about what you wrote on those forms and what documentation you submitted, and this is not optional. He hung up and looked at me and said, I promise I'm going to handle this. I said, Dale, I need you to understand that this is not something you handle. This is something we handle. Together. And if you're not going to be on the same side as me, I need to know that now. He said, I'm on your side. I'm always on your side. I nodded and started clearing the breakfast dishes because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Renata called back about 6 hours later. Dale was in the other room when she did, and even though he didn't know I could hear, I could. Our house is not big. Our walls are not thick. From his side of the conversation, pieced together as accurately as I can. Mom, what did you submit as custody documentation? Pause. What do you mean you found it? Longer pause. That was years ago, that doesn't, his voice dropped. Mom, you can't just use that, that's not, another pause. Then, very quietly, I know. Can you just give me a few days? He came back into the kitchen and I was standing at the counter pretending to look at my phone. She's not going to withdraw the enrollment, he said. I heard part of that. What did she find? What is the custody documentation? He sat down. He put his face in his hands for a second. Then he looked up. About 7 years ago, Petra was 2, you and I went through that really bad stretch. You remember? You were dealing with the stuff with your mom and I wasn't handling things well and we talked about separating. I remembered. It was a bad 4 or 5 months. We didn't separate. We went to couples counseling and we came out the other side. During that time, he said, my mother had a family law attorney draft something. Just as a precaution, she said. It was a document outlining a proposed custody and guardianship arrangement in the event that we split up. I signed it. It was hypothetical. I never thought. Dale. It was hypothetical. Did I sign it? He was quiet. Did anyone tell me this document existed? No, he said. She said it was just to have something in place in case things went south. I didn't think it would ever matter. We stayed together. It wasn't anger exactly. Or it was anger, but underneath the anger was something colder and larger, like I was finally seeing the shape of something that had been there for a long time. She's been planning this, I said. For 7 years. I don't think it's that calculated, he said. Dale. She had a lawyer draft a custody document 7 years ago that you signed without telling me. She just used it to enroll our daughter in a school as primary guardian. Is there anything else? Is there anything else I don't know about? He said no. I don't know if I believe him. I have an appointment with a family law attorney on Thursday. I made it that same night, after Dale went to bed. I'll update after Thursday. Update 2. Thursday happened. I'm still processing. The attorney's name is Diane. She was recommended by a woman in my neighborhood whose divorce I watched happen from a polite distance 2 years ago. I told Diane everything. I brought the enrollment packet. I told her about the custody document. She took notes and did not look alarmed, which was either reassuring or just professional composure. Here's what she told me, simplified. A document drafted by a private attorney, signed by one spouse, not notarized in the context of an actual legal proceeding, and never filed with a court is not a custody order. It has no legal standing. It does not grant Renata any rights over Petra. If Halcyon Academy accepted it as custody documentation, they either didn't scrutinize it properly or didn't understand what they were looking at. This was somewhat of a relief. However, Diane also said a few things that weren't. She said the fact that Dale signed this document without telling me was significant, not legally, but practically. It tells you something about the dynamic in your marriage as it relates to his mother. She said it carefully, but she said it. She also said that if Renata were to petition for grandparent visitation rights, or in a more extreme scenario some form of third-party custody, she would face an uphill battle, but the landscape for grandparent rights varies by state. In our state, a grandparent can petition for visitation under certain circumstances, if the parents are separated or divorced, if one parent is deceased, or if the court finds it's in the child's best interest. She cannot claim custody because she filled out a form wrong. But she can try to establish a foothold. Then Diane asked me whether Renata had ever had significant unsupervised time with Petra. Extended periods. Overnight stays. And I said yes. Because of course she had. She's the grandmother. When Petra was a toddler and I went back to work part-time, Renata watched her 2 days a week for almost a year because we couldn't afford full-time daycare. There have been overnight stays. Summer weeks. We have leaned on her for childcare in the way that a lot of families lean on grandparents. Diane made a note and said, I'm not saying that creates any legal problem for you right now. But it's context. If she ever tried to establish a visitation claim, she would point to that history and say she has a pre-existing caregiving relationship. She wrote primary caregiver on the enrollment form, I said. I know, Diane said. That's not accurate and not legally meaningful in isolation. But it tells us what narrative she's trying to build. A narrative. I've been thinking about that word for 4 days. When I got home, Dale was there. He asked how it went and I told him the document wasn't enforceable. I watched him visibly relax, and it bothered me that his first reaction was relief rather than continued concern about why his mother did this in the first place. I told him what Diane said about the narrative. He went quiet. Has your mother ever said anything to you about wanting a more formal role with Petra? I asked. Guardianship, custody, anything like that? He said, not explicitly. What does not explicitly mean? She's made comments. Over the years. About worrying what would happen to Petra if something happened to us. About wanting to make sure she'd be taken care of. Every parent worries about that, I said. That's what wills are for. He nodded slowly. Are we in the will, Dale? Is there something in your mother's estate that relates to Petra that I don't know about? He said his mother had some money set aside for Petra's education. He'd assumed it was just a savings account. You assumed? Yeah, I have been married to this man for 11 years and I am sitting here realizing there is an entire shadow world of conversations between him and his mother that I have not been part of and have not known about, and he has allowed it to continue because it was easier than making things uncomfortable. I don't know yet if that makes him complicit or just conflict avoidant in a way that has quietly corroded something important. I'm not sure which of those is worse. I've asked him to come to couples counseling. He said yes immediately. We have a first appointment in 2 weeks. The enrollment at Halcyon Academy is still not withdrawn. I am handling it myself now. I contacted the school directly, submitted documentation as Petra's legal parent, and was told they would process the withdrawal within 5 to 7 business days. Diane helped me draft the letter. Renata has not called me. She has texted Dale twice. He showed me the texts. The first said, I hope everyone has calmed down. The second, sent 2 days later, I'd like to take Petra for her birthday dinner like we always do. Please let me know if that's still happening. Petra's birthday is in 6 weeks. I don't know what I'm going to do about that yet. Update 3. The withdrawal from Halcyon Academy was confirmed. I got an email 3 days ago. That's done. I want to tell you about Marcus, because I haven't mentioned him since the first post and it feels relevant now. Last week he came downstairs while I was making dinner and sat at the kitchen island and said, "Can I ask you something?" I said sure. Did something happen with Grandma Renata? I turned down the heat on the stove and gave him my full attention, because Marcus doesn't usually initiate conversations like this. I said, "Why are you asking?" "She called me last week." "Which she never does, she usually only calls Dad." He paused. "She asked me what it's like living here. She asked if Petra seemed happy. She asked about the day-to-day stuff. What time we eat dinner, who picks Petra up from school, whether you and Dad seem stressed." I kept my face neutral. "What did you tell her?" I didn't really tell her anything. I said everything was normal. But it felt weird. Like she was interviewing me. "Has she ever done anything like that before?" He thought about it. "Not like that. I mean, she's always been kind of nosy. But this felt different. Like she was writing stuff down." "Did she say why she was asking?" "She said she just wanted to make sure everyone was doing okay." He stopped. "What else did she say?" He looked uncomfortable. "She said she sometimes worries that Petra isn't getting what she needs. And that she hopes the adults in her life are paying attention." I asked if he knew what she meant by that. He said no, but he looked like he might have a guess he didn't want to say out loud. I thanked him for telling me. I told him he didn't do anything wrong by talking to her, but that if she called again and started asking those kinds of questions, he didn't have to answer them. He could just say he had to go and hang up. He nodded. Then he said, "Is she trying to take Petra?" 16-year-old bluntness. I said, "No. She doesn't have any ability to do that. But she's been doing some things that were out of line and we're dealing with it." He said okay and started back upstairs. Then he stopped. "She used to ask me stuff about my mom too. When I was younger, before my mom moved. I always thought it was just Grandma being Grandma, but..." He shrugged. "Maybe it wasn't. I've been thinking about that since he said it." I emailed Diane and she told me to document it, which I've done. The couple's counseling first session was yesterday. I'm not going to go into detail because some of it is private and some of it is still too raw. But the therapist, his name is Robert, asked Dale at one point why he hadn't told me about the custody document when it was created 7 years ago. And Dale said something I wasn't expecting. He said, "Because my mother told me it was just a precaution and that telling her would upset her unnecessarily." And I thought my mother knew better than I did how to manage the situation. Robert asked what he meant by manage the situation. Dale said, "My mother has always been the person who holds things together. In my family growing up, she was the one who knew what needed to happen and made it happen. I think I've been deferring to her longer than I realized. On more things than I realized." He said it quietly. He wasn't performing it. He looked like a man saying something out loud for the first time that he'd been turning over privately for a while. I don't know yet what to do with that. I don't know if it changes anything or just explains things. Renata texted me directly 2 days ago, first time she's reached out to me since she hung up on me a month ago. The text said, "I hear the school situation has been resolved. I'd still like to talk. I think there are things you don't understand about my reasons. Can we have lunch?" I have not responded. Dale hasn't told me to respond, and hasn't told me not to. Petra asked me yesterday if she was going to see Grandma Renata for her birthday. I said I wasn't sure yet, that we were figuring it out. She said, "I hope so. She always gets me the best presents." 9 years old. She has no idea. I don't know what the birthday is going to look like. I don't know what lunch with Renata would look like or if I want to have it. Every time I think I've reached the bottom of this, there's another floor. What I do know is that the document is gone, the school enrollment is gone, I have a lawyer, I have a therapist working with me and Dale, and I have Marcus, who it turns out has been paying a lot more attention than any of the adults gave him credit for. Update 4. It's been about 3 weeks since my last update. I want to be honest that part of why I didn't write sooner is that things have felt very quiet on the surface, and I've been trying to figure out if the quiet means something good or just means the next thing hasn't surfaced yet. I'm still not entirely sure. Petra's birthday happened. We had a small family dinner at home, me, Dale, Marcus, and my sister and her husband who drove in for the weekend. No Renata. I had told Dale 2 weeks before that I wasn't ready for her to be at the birthday, and that if he wanted to push back on that I needed him to make the case to me directly rather than just letting it happen. He didn't push back. He called Renata himself and told her we were keeping it small this year. She apparently took it quietly, which I found more unsettling than if she'd argued. She sent Petra a gift in the mail. A very nice gift, an illustrated encyclopedia of animals, hardcover, because somehow she knew about the animal book phase. Petra was thrilled. I stood in the kitchen holding the wrapping paper after Petra had run upstairs with the book, and I thought about what it means that Renata pays that kind of attention. Whether it's love or something else or both at the same time. I didn't reach a conclusion. The couple's counseling is continuing. We're 4 sessions in now. I'm not going to describe the sessions in detail, but I'll say that Robert has a way of asking Dale questions that get him to say things plainly that he would normally circle around for years. Last week Dale said, for the first time in 11 years of marriage, that he has spent most of our relationship trying to make sure his mother and I never had to directly disagree, and that this meant lying to both of us at different times about different things, small things mostly, but a pattern. He said he didn't frame it as lying to himself at the time. He framed it as keeping the peace. Robert asked him whose peace he was keeping. Dale didn't answer for a long moment. Then he said, hers, mostly. I think I've been keeping hers. I have not responded to Renata's lunch invitation. I've been thinking about it, and I've talked about it with Diane and with Robert separately, and here is where I've landed, at least for now. I am willing to meet with her once, in a neutral place, with the understanding that it is a conversation and not a negotiation and not a reconciliation. I want to hear what she thinks her reasons are. I want to look at her face and see if I can understand how someone does what she did. I'm not going in expecting an apology, and I'm not going in expecting to forgive anything. I'm going because I think there are things I don't know yet, and I would rather know them. I haven't reached out to set it up. I will probably do it this week. The thing that has shifted for me, slowly, over the last month, is that I've stopped being primarily angry at Renata and started being primarily sad about something else. Because Renata is who she has always been who she is, and the real question isn't why she did this. The real question is why it was possible for her to do this without me knowing. And the answer to that question lives in my marriage, not in her. Dale and I are not okay yet. I want to be clear about that. We are working, and I think we are both working honestly, and I believe him when he says he wants to get this right. But 11 years of a habit doesn't dissolve in 4 therapy sessions, and I am still finding small things, small moments, where I can see the old pattern trying to reassert itself. He catches it now, usually. Sometimes I have to name it. We're learning a new way of doing something we thought we already knew how to do. Marcus asked me last week if things were getting better. I said I thought so, slowly. He nodded and said, good. Petra needs it to be normal. He said it like he's been quietly holding that worry for months, which he probably has. He's a good kid. I don't say that enough, probably, even to myself. I don't know what the lunch with Renata is going to look like. I don't know how much further this goes or what the next floor is if there is one. But I know where I stand now in a way I didn't 2 months ago, and that counts for something. I'll update if there's something worth updating. Hi there, if you made it so far. Consider dropping a like and maybe subscribing. Thanks. And have a nice one.